Greetings Internet, here I am back for another video essay and with a brand new haircut after so long. So about a year ago, I took it upon myself to go see Toy Story 4 in the theater because I just needed a trip to the theater to pull myself out of the funk that I was in at the time. And even though I still stood by that movie 3 had the perfect ending to one of the greatest sagas in film history, I still went into it with an open mind after hearing the praise it was receiving so far. I myself walked out with surprise and positive impressions towards the movie after it was over, although I still said at the time that I expected it would generally leave audiences divided and that I wasn't ruling out the possibility that my own feelings towards the movie might sour over time. Coming back to the movie a year later, I can confidently say that I still think it's a good movie. Pretty close to, if not on par with the quality of the other movies. Of course, that's just an overall testament to how great Toy Story is as a franchise. Of course, I was also right when I said that despite the positive reception and how there weren't many people who would go so far as calling it a bad movie, reactions towards it were still somewhat divided. Some criticisms I feel are fair, even though not deal breakers for me personally, like how the grand majority of the Toy Story gang we've come to know and love got sidelined for most of the movie, and another is how it degrades the character of Buzz Lightyear. Personally, I never thought it made Buzz out to be dumb, per se, as I could conceive that the idea of a conscience would be foreign to him, and it's just in his nature to do what he feels is instinctively right, and not always knowing what to do when the time comes for him to take action is just something he wouldn't be used to. But I won't deny that I see why the scenario would bother others, and really, nothing is going to ever beat Utility Belt Buzz from movie 2. But the most common criticism towards the movie, apart from having no reason to exist, that I really want to address is that it betrays the philosophy prevalent throughout the series of life only being worth living if you're loved by a child. From the very moment I first saw it, I saw it differently, and I would like to take this opportunity to discuss that. I don't see the movie 4 as a betrayal of Woody's philosophy, but more as a deconstruction of it, and by further extent, a deconstruction of Woody's character. For my money, Woody is one of the most, if not the most, complexly written character in Hollywood history. Anyone who knows about how he was written in the first drafts of movie 1 will know exactly how hard it was to get his character just right. Just how meticulous a tightrope walk it was to balance his edge and levels of cynicism and still have a character whom an audience would be glad that they stuck with in his development. When you get down to it, these movies at their center are about Woody's journey, and that his journey doesn't stop just after Andy goes off to college. Granted, I get the argument that the abundance of Woody in this story is at the expense of the presence of other toys, makes this feel kind of fanficky and even somewhat pervades the concept of a sequel, but in regards to continuing Woody's journey as a character, it gets more interesting and awakens more stark realizations the more that I think about it. Woody's biggest endeavor throughout Toy Story 4 is getting Forky back to Bonnie. How come? Because he firmly believes that it's his solemn duty to ensure the well-being of his child. And in this case, it means reuniting the toy that Bonnie made as a source of comfort when she was starting kindergarten. And even though Bonnie has lost her interest in playing with Woody, he's still committed to her, all while expecting nothing in return because he just doesn't know what else to do with himself. When Woody's journey to getting Forky back to Bonnie is interrupted all of a sudden by his reunion with Bo Peep, he discovers that she's adopted her own life philosophy. She has embraced being a lost toy and has turned away from the life of being there for a child and instead looks out for herself, her sheep, and other lost toys whom she befriends along the way. And while this might seem off-topic at first, let's bring up Lotso from movie 3 for a minute. I believe that Lotso is a better antagonist than the general populace gives him credit for because he basically serves as an antithesis to Woody. Think about it. Lotso did start out as having a lot in common with Woody. He was a favorite toy, and when he was accidentally left on the side of the road with Big Baby and Chuckles, he braved the odds to get them all back home. But then, when he discovered that he had been replaced, that was where he snapped. I see Lotso as this representation of who Woody could have become if he allowed himself to be overcome by his ego. And in the first movie, when Woody felt threatened by Buzz's arrival into the group of toys, he eventually went back on his philosophy about the job of not being about how much one is played with to actively saying to Buzz's face, "Back off, he's mine, you're not going to take him away from me." And when he gets lost and tries to get back home to Andy, he only brings Buzz along at first so that he'll once again be on good terms with the other toys and have their trust back. There was even one scene in the first draft of the first Toy Story where the toys retaliate against Woody for deliberately throwing Buzz out the window, and Woody tries to intimidate Sleeky Dog into pushing them back by saying, "If it wasn't for me, Andy wouldn't even pay attention to you." Not an appealing trait for a protagonist, obviously, but when you think about it, that is sort of parallel to what Lotso does, as he's driven by his ego. He lies to Big Baby about all of them being replaced, he shouts down Chuckles to silence, and when they all get to Sunnyside Daycare, Lotso establishes his own hierarchy that he places himself on top of. Because he already got Big Baby under his thumb through dishonesty and manipulation, he was able to do the same for the other toys at the daycare. He could tell the toys at the daycare that all toys have their place, and if the new ones put up with the abuse from the toddlers in the caterpillar room long enough, they could move up to the ranks in the butterfly room, when he's really just setting them up to be trashed and eventually thrown away, while he's selfishly guarding his own. And in movie 1, Woody moves past his selfishness and regards the most important thing to consider with Buzz being Andy's new favorite toy. It's how it makes Andy happy, and it makes Buzz realize that he had a worthwhile purpose, even if it was not what he initially thought it was. And throughout the film series, when it comes to Woody's journey, each film seems to be about him committing to being selfless. Movie 2 was about him considering going on display with Jessie, Bullseye, and Stinky Pete, both so that they wouldn't have to go back into storage, and so that he would never have to worry about losing a child's love again. But in the end, he eventually decides, I'm going to be there for my kid as long as possible, even if it's only temporary, and I'm going to let Jessie and Bullseye have that same chance. And movie 3 was about him not letting go until it was officially over, and Andy actively and willingly said goodbye personally. Even if it did come off to the other toys as him being delusional and clingy at first, he proved to be right in the end. But by movie 4, Woody's become so committed and so unconditionally ensuring towards Bonnie's happiness and well-being that he's ultimately stumped when he's forced to ask himself, what does it all amount to? In pursuit of putting his child first this whole time, he's forced to come to the realization of what he himself has lost. His dedication to being selfless has left him confronting his lack of true self at this point. And if having an existential crisis over the idea that nothing of value would be lost if you vanished isn't a horrifying prospect to confront, then I don't know what is. Bo Peep even brings this to Woody's attention when she and he butt heads over their opposing philosophies and lifestyles. Bo's been living not by the philosophy of every toy for itself, but rather by toys look out for other toys. But by the end of the day, both her and Woody's point of view prevail. She sees more eye to eye with him in the scene where he extends his hand out to Gabby. Speaking of, let's talk about Gabby for a minute, who had my deepest sympathies at the end of the day. The movie set her up as such a threat right to the third act where she reveals that she was misunderstood, which I know so many people have argued is overused and is a bad tactic for trying to force sympathy from a villain, which, depending on how the story uses it, I can concur. But the thing with Gabby is that instead of trying to manipulate Woody into giving her his voice box, she tries to settle the dust with him. And during a scene where she got dumped in a crate after finally having Woody's box installed, I was sitting there thinking to myself, oh goodness, this is going to be it. She's going to snap like Lotso did. She's going to go down the dark route and try to take her hurt feelings out on Woody. But she never did. The part that followed, where she gives in to despair, was when all my initial perceptions of her were shattered, and she officially had my sympathy. I was rooting for her to get her happy ending in the end, and I was tearing up when she finally did. Woody and Bo, along with the help of Ducky, Bunny, and Doot Kaboom, helped give Gabby the opportunity to live the life of being loved by a child that they themselves were fortunate enough to have lived before. And remember what I said earlier about movie 1, where Woody helps Buzz recognize he has a purpose that he never knew he had, not as a space ranger, but Andy's toy? This is even exemplified to an extent in the character of Forky. Since Forky is basically a handmade toy who thinks that he's trash, but later it's revealed that he associates the word trash with a term more akin to the meaning of toy, he comes to terms with feeling a duty towards Bonnie after listening to Woody explain how much it means to her. Something he has to pass on to a female spork made just like him, who joins the group at the end of the movie. Although the question of how inanimate objects in this universe come to life is a whole other can of worms which I would prefer to leave for other internet personas to try and explore. Toys are made with the purpose of being played with, that's pretty clear from the get-go. But the term toy can mean a lot of things, since a toy can range from something that's factory made to something you make from items you find in a recycle bin. Also, some factory-made toys aren't fortunate enough to ever get to fulfill the purpose of being in the possession of a child. This connected with me very personally when I first saw the film, because really, it is something that we as people are faced with regularly. We don't just wake up one day and decide that this is what my life purpose is going to be. Life is generally about us playing by ear, and we don't always get to fulfill our goals in life. At least not when we'd like to. And as much as we like to assign ourselves a purpose to give our lives meaning, we still don't know why we're here or what the universe really wants from us, and we recognize very quickly that it doesn't always play out in our favor. We basically try to assign ourselves some sort of purpose to give ourselves that sense of fulfillment, as well as to satisfy the ongoing question of why we're even alive. But the truth is that our perceptions about life are always changing. They're always being challenged by circumstance. They're always being redefined and expanded upon the more that our eyes are being opened to different realities. And I've always been firmly of the belief that the best, most fulfilling thing that you can do for yourself is largely contingent on what the best thing you can do for others is. And for Woody, by deciding to go with the lifestyle that Bo has been living, he's finally gotten a look at a new purpose he could serve, by giving other toys the chance to live by the philosophy of a life worth living is being there for a child that he embraced for so long. Even though for Woody this does mean having to say goodbye to Bonnie as well as the other toys, and at the scene where they do, Buzz assures Woody that Bonnie will be okay, and that it's okay to fulfill a quest for himself now. And Woody accepts this, not only because this means he gets to be with Bo, but also because they spend their days together helping other toys who have been lost or sitting on the shelves of fairgrounds for so long in finding a child to be loved by. At least that's how I see it. This is the most thought I'd given to analyzing a movie in a while. And I didn't think that it would be this movie of all things, but in all honesty, I'm glad it is, because if a movie can merit as much discussion as this, even and especially if it's only been out for a year now, I think it's very indicative of how valuable it is as a work of art. Feel free to share your agreements or disagreements in the comments section, and take care of yourselves.